Welcome to the Battle of the Conferences. Ever wondered which conference can put together the best NFL roster? That's what we're going to find out. We take the best players from every team in each conference, build an NFL roster, and pit those teams against each other in a bracket format. The last conference standing will be crowned champion, which means absolutely nothing. Let the battle begin. This is it. This is the final head-to-head Big Ten versus the SEC, the two NFL player-producing powerhouse conferences in college football. And today, they come up against each other head-to-head to see who is the best, according to me. Now, we've seen both of these teams multiple times. This is the third time we're looking at them, so I'm not going to go into detail, for example, for all the backups for the offensive line, things like that. We know what the teams are. I will, of course, mention the key players that decide the head-to-heads. The main thing with this one is no more weak spots at any position for any of these teams. This is the absolute best coming up against the absolute best. And I have no idea who wins. I should point out, obviously, in the intro to these things, when I show a picture of last year's Super Bowl winner, I do have the SEC logo superimposed on there. But that, of course, is just because the SEC logo is the only conference logo that is a circle, and a circle covers a head the best. That is no hint as to who will end up winning. It was the only logo that fit from a shape. But that conference is also here, so they may well end up being the final ultimate champion. But let's find that out by starting now with the quarterback position. And we start with Big Ten's Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and Russell Wilson coming up against Matthew Stafford, Cam Newton, and Eli Manning. And you could say it's close, but really it's not close. Big Ten here takes the first point. So then the running backs, and we've got Le'Veon Bell, Jordan Howard, Ezekiel Elliott coming up against Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry, Todd Gurley, Jeremy Hill, and again another point here quite easily goes to Big Ten. They've taken the first 2 points, but we move on to the fullback position. Big Ten, Andy Janovich out in Nebraska coming up against Patrick DeMarco, Charleston Fowler, and the SEC finally take a point back. We go 2-1 as we take a look at the tight end position. For the tight end position, we've got CJ Fedorowicz and his gang coming up against Jordan Reed, Jason Witten, Martellus Bennett. A clear, easy point there for the SEC, and we're all tied. Then we move on to the wide receivers, and let's start with the SEC. We know what they've got here. Julio Jones, AJ Green, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, Alshon Jeffrey. You don't really stand a chance, but Big Ten have got Allen Robinson, Stephon Diggs, Michael Thomas, Terrell Pryor, Mohamed Sanu, Eric Decker. It's not a bad group, but the SEC takes another point, and now they take the lead for the first time. So here we are, the final offensive group, and we've got the offensive lines coming up against each other. Big Ten, Joe Thomas, Richie Incognito, Travis Frederick, Marshall Yanda, Jack Conklin, some of the best of the absolute best in their respective positions, coming against Andrew Whitworth, Ramon Foster, Marquise Pouncey, Gabe Jackson, Marcus Gilbert. Again, some of the best in their position, but then also some of the just very good in their positions. And Big Ten, we also know they've got crazy depth. Take the point, and we're all even. Moving on to the defense. So as we take a look now at the defense, we were tied at the same point in the last episode, 3-3, and then the SEC ran away from the Pac-12. Let's see if anything similar happens here. I don't expect it to happen, though. We start with the defensive line. So defensive line, let's start with Big Ten. We've got JJ Watt, Ndamukong Suh, Joey Bosa, and some very strong backups coming up against Danielle Hunter, Geno Atkins, Michael Bennett, and it's a very close one. You know what? This is so close, I can only do this on a player-per-player basis. I cannot decide any other way. We're going to take all 9 players and head them against each other. So I did it taking a look at every single one. We're going literally position versus position. So JJ Watt better than Danielle Hunter. Mike Daniels better than Sheldon Richardson. Brandon Graham better than Trey Flowers. But then in my opinion, Geno Atkins better than Ndamukong Suh. Fletcher Cox better than Kawan Short. Marcel Darius better than Alan Branch. Remember, these are like by tiny, tiny advantages. It's not saying they're significantly better. Michael Bennett better than Joey Bosa. Cameron Wake better than Carlos Dunlap. And then Charles Johnson better than Cameron Hayward. It comes out 5-4 in favor of the SEC, so they take the point. However, I'm not really comfortable making that point. If this ends up being a point that swings the entire thing, it's going to be controversial. If making this position group a tie wouldn't mean that we could potentially end up with a tie later, I would much rather do that. But based on looking at the players versus the players, I got to give the advantage here to the SEC. Of course, that doesn't really include the weighting of player versus player, but that's also in favor of both teams. SEC takes this very hard-fought point. So then the inside linebackers, and let's take a look at Big Ten. Ryan Shazier, Navarro Bowman, Paul Posluszny, up against Dante Hightower, Alec Ogletree, CJ Mosley, Deion Jones. I gotta say, I prefer the SEC here, so that point there going to the SEC as well. Then onto the outside linebackers. You got Sean Lee and Tombahar Lee, Levante David, Whitney Merciless, Ryan Kerrigan coming up against Thomas Davis, Jadeveon Clowney, KJ Wright, Justin Houston, Von Miller, Marcus Golden. I said this the last time, you cannot beat these outside linebackers. You got maybe 2 or even 3 with Jadeveon Clowney, the absolute best 3-4 outside linebackers in the NFL right now, with obviously Justin Houston, Von Miller, Jadeveon Clowney. You got 2 of the absolute best 4-3 outside linebackers in Thomas Davis, KJ Wright. It doesn't really matter who you have. Sean Lee is incredible. Whitney Merciless and Ryan Kerrigan are 2 of the best underrated pass rushers. Levante David, one of the best rising 4-3 outside linebackers in the NFL. But the SEC there is just so incredibly strong, they take the next point. And that is actually it already. The difference now is 3 points. The points left to get, there's only 2. And at this point, we can already see now the SEC is absolutely going to run away with it. So let's take a look at the cornerbacks. You got Vontae Davis, Bradley Roby, Eli Apple, Micah Hyde, Nolan Carroll. It's not a bad group, but it's also not Patrick Peterson, Big Play Slay, Tyrann Mathieu, Casey Hayward, Stephon Gilmore. Easy point there going to the SEC for the cornerbacks. And then we move on to safeties, where again, it's no contest, but with Devin McCourty, Malcolm Jenkins, 2 of the best safeties, it's still good. Adrian Amos, Ricardo Allen, Sean Davis, but they come up against Eric Berry, Clinton Dix, Reggie Nelson, Landon Collins, Keanu Neal, Rashad Jones. It's not a competition. The SEC takes the final point available and wins the entire thing with a score of 8-3. And according to the way I've done this, the SEC, without a doubt, and to be fair, it was probably expected, is the absolute single best conference in college football at producing NFL players. Now, the biggest thing we saw there is that they just run away with it on defense, just producing the best players overall on defense out of any conference. They run away from Big Ten. They could have maybe taken that defensive line point. Let's even give Big Ten that defensive line point. It makes the score 7-4. But the SEC still wins, is still the best at producing NFL players, and is to be expected considering it's a conference with more players in the NFL than any other one, and it's not even close.